In February 2026, scientists at Northwestern University did something that should have made global headlines. They waited for people to fall asleep. Then, while those people were unconscious, unaware, completely gone from the waking world, the researchers began whispering specific sounds, specific cues, targeted at specific problems each person had been trying to solve before bed. And when those people woke up, they had answers, not vague impressions, not hunches, solutions, creative, structured, working solutions. To problems their conscious minds had been stuck on for days, the scientists hadn't given them anything, no hints, no extra time, no new information. They had simply guided their dreams. Welcome, or welcome back, to Leaked Frequency. We explore the science of human experience, the things you've lived but never had an explanation for. Let's get into it. Here's the question nobody actually answers. If your brain can solve problems while you're unconscious, who exactly is doing the solving? Because it isn't you. Not the version of you that reads, thinks, decides, and worries. That version is gone, switched off. So what's left? And why is that version of you the one you never meet? Apparently better at certain things than you are. We're going to find out. By the end of this video, the way you think about sleep will never be the same. Let's start with something you've definitely experienced. You've been stuck on something. A problem, a decision, a creative block. Think about it until your head hurts. You go to bed frustrated, no closer to an answer. And then you wake up. And somehow you just know. Not always. But enough times that you've noticed. Enough times that it doesn't feel like coincidence. You probably called it luck. Or rest. Or maybe you thought your brain just needed a break. It wasn't a break. Your brain was working harder than ever. Here's what the science actually shows. Sleep is not a pause in cognition. It is a different kind of cognition. One that runs on completely different rules. Rules that your conscious waking mind physically cannot access. In 2004, a team at the University of Lübeck gave participants a mathematical puzzle. The puzzle had a hidden shortcut, a pattern that could cut the solution time dramatically. When participants tried to solve it while awake, only 20% discovered the shortcut on their own. But when they were allowed to sleep between attempts, 59% found it, nearly 3 times as many. They hadn't studied more. They hadn't been given a hint. They had simply slept. The researchers called it insight. But that word doesn't do justice to what was actually happening inside those sleeping brains. To understand what's really going on, we need to go inside the sleeping brain itself. And what we find there is genuinely strange. When you fall asleep, your brain doesn't go quiet. It goes through a cycle. Roughly every 90 minutes. That moves between different stages. Light sleep, deep sleep, and then REM, rapid eye movement sleep. The stage where most vivid dreaming happens. During REM, something remarkable occurs. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, judgment, and linear thinking, becomes significantly less active. The part of you that says that won't work and that's not realistic and stay focused goes quiet. But the regions responsible for emotional processing, memory consolidation, and associative thinking, they light up. They go into overdrive. What this means is extraordinary. During REM sleep, your brain is making connections between pieces of information that your waking, logical mind would never allow. It is linking memories from last week to an idea from 3 years ago. It is connecting an emotion you felt in childhood to a problem you're facing today. It is running combinations that your conscious mind would immediately dismiss as irrelevant. And sometimes, those combinations are the answer. This is why the Northwestern study hit so hard. The researchers used a technique called targeted memory reactivation. Before participants fell asleep, each person was given a creative puzzle to work on. Each puzzle was paired with a specific sound. A unique audio cue played softly while the person worked. Then the person slept. And during the specific sleep stage the researchers were targeting, a transitional phase between wakefulness and deep sleep called hypnagogia. The sounds were played again, quietly. Just enough to activate the memory without waking the person. The next morning, those participants solved their puzzles significantly better than the control group. Not because they were smarter. Not because the puzzles were easier. Because their sleeping brains had been quietly, invisibly, working on the problem all night. And the researchers had simply pointed them in the right direction. Your brain was already going to work on something while you slept. They just chose what? Think about that. Really think about it. But here's where it gets strange. Because the Northwestern study wasn't testing something new. It was confirming something that history had been quietly whispering for centuries. In 1865, German chemist August Kekulé had been struggling for years to determine the molecular structure of benzene. One afternoon, he dozed off in front of his fireplace. He dreamed of a snake eating its own tail. He woke up and realized the benzene molecule wasn't a chain, it was a ring, a closed loop, a structure that had never been proposed before in chemistry. That dream produced one of the most important discoveries in the history of organic chemistry. In 1921, Otto Loewi had been working on a theory about how nerve cells communicate. He had the idea years earlier but couldn't figure out how to test it. One night he woke from a dream, grabbed a pencil, scrawled something on a piece of paper, and went back to sleep. The next morning he couldn't read his own writing. The following night, the dream came back. This time he ran straight to his laboratory. The experiment he designed that night, from that dream, earned him the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 1936. Paul McCartney woke up one morning with a complete melody in his head. He went immediately to the piano to play it, convinced he must have heard it somewhere before. He hadn't. The song was Yesterday. It became one of the most covered songs in the history of recorded music. These aren't coincidences. These are data points. And the data is pointing at something that should make you deeply uncomfortable about how you think about the word thinking. Because here's the question we've been circling, the one I promised we'd answer. If your brain is solving problems, making connections, generating ideas, while you are unconscious, then who is the you that's doing it? This is not a philosophical trick question. This is a real neurological puzzle that scientists are actively working to understand. Your conscious experience, your sense of being you, of having thoughts and making decisions, is generated by a relatively small portion of your brain's total activity. Estimates vary, but research suggests that conscious processing accounts for somewhere between 5% and 10% of total brain activity at any given moment. Which means that 90 to 95% of what your brain does, you never experience, you never see it, you never have access to it. It just happens. Beneath the surface. In the dark. Sleep doesn't turn this system off. It turns the conscious system off. And what's left? That vast, humming, parallel processing engine underneath keeps running, keeps connecting, keeps building. The version of you that solves problems in your sleep isn't a different person. It's the larger part of the same person, the part that never gets to speak when you're awake because your conscious mind is too loud. Now, if you're finding this as fascinating as I am, this is a good moment. Hit subscribe. This channel exists for exactly this reason, to find the questions that feel too strange to ask out loud and chase them all the way to the bottom, every week. We're just getting started. Let's go deeper, because understanding that your brain works during sleep is one thing. Understanding how it works, the actual mechanics, changes everything. There's a concept in neuroscience called memory consolidation. When you learn something or experience something, the initial memory is fragile. It's held in a structure called the hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped region that acts as a temporary storage buffer. Think of it as your brain's RAM. It can hold information, but not forever, during deep sleep. Specifically slow-wave sleep. The brain systematically transfers these fresh memories from the hippocampus into the cortex, into long-term storage. But this process isn't just a copy-paste. It's an edict. As memories are transferred and replayed during sleep, the brain strips away the irrelevant details and keeps the meaningful patterns. It compresses the raw experience into something more useful, more abstract, more transferable, more like a principile than a specific event. This is why you can wake up understanding something you didn't understand the night before, even without any new information. Your brain spent the night reorganizing what it already had, turning raw data into insight. And during REM sleep, a separate process runs simultaneously. While consolidation is happening in slow-wave sleep, REM is doing something else entirely. It is taking those freshly consolidated memories and cross-referencing them against everything else you know, looking for patterns, searching for connections that shouldn't logically exist, but sometimes do. A 2019 study from University of California, San Diego found that people who took a nap containing REM sleep were significantly better at finding hidden associative links between pieces of information they had learned separately. They weren't smarter. Their brains had simply been given the time to notice what their waking minds had missed. Here's something even stranger. And this is the part that doesn't get talked about. The connections your brain makes during REM sleep are not random. They are weighted. Your brain prioritizes the things that mattered emotionally. The problems that caused you stress, the questions that genuinely interested you, the memories attached to strong feeling. This means that the quality of what your brain does while you sleep is directly influenced by how you engage with ideas while you're awake. If you go to bed after 2 hours of passive scrolling, your brain has fragments, disconnected noise. It will process what it has, but there's not much to work with. If you go to bed having genuinely wrestled with a problem, having sat with it, turned it over, felt frustrated by it, genuinely wanted to understand it, your brain will treat that as high priority overnight. It will allocate resources to it. It will run more combinations. It will try harder. Your brain responds to your intellectual effort the same way a muscle responds to resistance. The harder you push before sleep, the harder it works while you're gone. Which brings us to something the researchers at Northwestern discovered almost by accident. The technique of targeted memory reactivation, playing specific sounds during sleep to activate specific memories, worked best when the participants had been genuinely engaged with their puzzle before bed. The ones who had only glanced at their problem showed smaller improvements. The ones who had really tried, who had felt the frustration, who had genuinely wanted to solve it, showed the largest gains. The sleeping brain isn't a machine you can simply program from the outside. It responds to how much you cared. And this has an implication that is almost uncomfortable to sit with. The ideas you've had, the breakthroughs, the sudden moments of clarity, the solutions that arrived out of nowhere. They weren't random. They weren't luck. Your brain had been building toward them in the dark, night after night, because some part of you had decided that finding the answer mattered. Now let's go somewhere even more unsettling. We've been talking about dreams as if they're a byproduct of this process, a kind of side effect. The brain running its programs and generating strange visual noise as it does so. But there's a growing body of research suggesting that dreams might be something more functional than that. A 2010 study from Harvard Medical School asked participants to learn a virtual maze, then divided them into groups, those who rested while awake and those who napped. Within the napping group, the ones who reported dreaming about the maze, specifically dreaming about navigating through it, showed dramatic improvements in maze performance when they were tested afterward. Far better than the ones who napped but didn't dream about it. The dream wasn't incidental. The dream was the learning. This challenges something fundamental about how we think about consciousness and experience. Because if the brain can run a functional simulation of a problem while you sleep, a dream that is actually practicing the skill, rehearsing the solution, testing the answer, then what exactly is dreaming for? The honest answer is we don't fully know. And that's not a cop-out. That's the actual state of neuroscience in 2026. Dreams remain one of the last genuinely mysterious territories in brain science. We know they involve memory. We know they involve emotion. We know they generate creative connections. We know they can be targeted and shaped by external cues. We know they produce insights that waking thinking cannot. What we don't know is what evolutionary purpose is served by constructing these elaborate internal experiences while we lie unconscious? Why does the brain bother to generate a story? Characters, settings, narrative, instead of simply running silent background computations? One hypothesis, and this one keeps me up at night, is that dreams are how the brain practices being conscious. That consciousness itself is a skill. And like any skill, it needs rehearsal. In the absence of the real world, eyes closed, body paralyzed, external inputs cut off, the brain generates its own world to practice on. If that's true, then every dream you've ever had was your brain keeping you sharp, keeping the system running, making sure that when you wake up, the experience of being you is waiting, intact, ready to resume. Let's bring this back to earth for a moment, because everything we've covered has a practical dimension, and I don't want to leave without it. The research is consistent on several points, and if you take nothing else from this video, take these. First, the hour before you sleep matters enormously. What you put in your mind in that final window is what your brain will work with overnight, not passively, actively, urgently. If you want your brain to solve something, give it the problem before you sleep. Write it down. Think about it. Let yourself feel the frustration of not knowing the answer. Second, sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it breaks the process entirely. The REM stage, where creative connections happen, is the one most vulnerable to being cut short. If you're sleeping 6 hours instead of 8, you're losing a disproportionate amount of REM. You're not just tired. You're less creative, less insightful, less able to see the connections that would otherwise be obvious. Third, and this is the one most people ignore, when you wake up, your first few minutes matter. That hypnagogic threshold between sleep and waking, the moments when you're not quite either, is when the night's work is most accessible. The ideas are there. They dissolve quickly. Before you check your phone, before you engage with the day, give yourself 2 minutes of stillness to notice what your brain is trying to tell you. Some of the most important thoughts you'll ever have will arrive in those 2 minutes. Most people are already scrolling by then, and the thought is gone forever. Now, let's arrive somewhere. Because we started with a question that seemed to be about sleep, about dreams, about creativity. But we've ended up somewhere much larger. We've ended up at the question of what consciousness actually is. If the vast majority of your brain's processing happens without your awareness, if the most creative, connective, problem-solving version of your mind operates while you're unconscious, if your dreams can actively rehearse and build and solve, then what is consciousness actually for? One answer, perhaps the most humbling one, is that consciousness is not the source of your intelligence. It is the surface of it, the interface, the part that communicates, narrates, and takes credit. The real work, the deep, parallel, associative, creative work, happens underneath, in the dark, while you sleep. Which means every morning when you wake up, you're not starting fresh. You're picking up where your other self left off. The self you never meet. The one that works through the night. The one that, in February 2026, scientists finally found a way to speak to. The question isn't whether your brain is doing this. It is. Every night. For every person reading this, regardless of whether they remember their dreams or believe in any of this, the question is what you're going to deal with that. What problem are you going to give it tonight? If this video changed how you think about what happens when you close your eyes, there's an entire channel built on exactly that feeling. Subscribe. Because the next one goes somewhere you won't expect. See you then.